The story of Emperor Yongle begins not in the glittering palaces of Beijing, but in the long shadow of rebellion, blood, and betrayal. He was born as Zhu Di, the fourth son of the Hongwu Emperor, the founding ruler of the Ming Dynasty. Zhu Di was not destined to be emperor. He was a prince, powerful but not the chosen one. The throne was supposed to belong to his nephew, the Jianwen Emperor. But destiny and Zhu Di's ruthless ambition had very different plans. From an early age, Zhu Di was a man of discipline, cunning, and steel. He had fought in countless military campaigns alongside his father, helping to stabilize the empire that rose after the fall of the Mongol-led Yuan dynasty. But he knew the taste of blood and victory long before he ever dreamed of wearing the dragon robe. When his father died, Zhu Di watched his nephew ascend the throne, a young idealistic ruler who wanted to centralize power and weaken the princes. That decision would prove fatal. Zhu Di could not tolerate being sidelined. As the Prince of Yan, he held command over a vast army in the north, stationed near the Great Wall to defend against Mongol invasions. But over time, that army became his personal power base. Whispers began spreading that the prince had greater ambition than loyalty, that his eyes were fixed not on the horizon, but on the forbidden city itself. The Jianwen Emperor, young and naive, began stripping Zhu Di's allies of power, removing his trusted generals, and sending spies to watch him. It was a dangerous game, one that pushed the proud prince into open rebellion. In 1399, the empire plunged into chaos. Zhu Di declared war in the name of cleansing the court of corrupt officials who, he claimed, misled the emperor. But in truth, it was the beginning of a brutal civil war, uncle against nephew, blood against blood. For 3 long years, the Ming Empire was torn apart by the Jingnon campaign. Zhu Di's armies swept across the land like wildfire. Cities burned, rivers ran red, and loyalists of the young emperor were executed in droves. Zhu Di was no mere soldier. He was a strategist, unpredictable and relentless. He used deception, forged alliances, and struck without mercy. The war culminated in 1402 when his forces captured the Ming capital, Nanjing. What happened next was both mysterious and horrifying. The Jianwen Emperor vanished in the flames of the imperial palace. Some said he burned to death. Others whispered that he escaped, disguised as a monk. No one knows for sure, but Zhu Di emerged from the ashes as the new ruler, the Yongle Emperor. His throne was built on the corpses of his kin. Yet the new emperor knew that the memory of his coup would haunt him. To legitimize his rule, he had to erase the past and rewrite it. He ordered officials to destroy records of the Jianwen reign, purged scholars who questioned his right to rule, and executed anyone who spoke the forbidden name of the previous emperor. Those who resisted were wiped out along with their families, men, women, and children. Even the Confucian scholars who tried to protect history found themselves dragged to execution grounds, their loyalty crushed beneath the emperor's iron will. Zhu Di ruled with a dual face, To the people, he was a restorer of order, a patron of learning, and a man who brought back stability to a fractured empire. But behind the palace walls, he was a ruler haunted by fear, fear of ghosts, both living and dead. He knew that power gained through blood could only be kept through fear. He surrounded himself with loyal generals and secret informants. His spy network extended through every province, every temple, every bureaucratic office. No whisper escaped his ears. He moved the imperial capital from Nanjing to Beijing, a bold move that symbolized a new beginning and also allowed him to keep his military base close. There, he began constructing what would become one of the most iconic symbols of China's might, the Forbidden City. Tens of thousands of laborers worked day and night to raise the colossal palace complex, a city within a city where the emperor would rule unseen, divine, and absolute. The grandeur of the Forbidden City was meant to show heaven itself that Yongle was chosen, a ruler beyond mortal reproach. But the higher he built his empire, the more he seemed to drown in suspicion. His early years as emperor were marked by purges. Generals who had once fought beside him were executed for imaginary crimes. Officials who hesitated to flatter him were demoted, imprisoned, or tortured. His wrath was swift and unpredictable. In his court, a single word could mean life or death. Still, the empire prospered. Trade routes reopened, the Grand Canal was repaired, and the Great Wall was reinforced. But beneath the prosperity lay an empire terrified of its own ruler. The same hands that built monuments to glory also dug graves for dissenters. Judy's paranoia deepened as he aged. He constantly feared rebellion, that someone, somewhere, would rise as he once did. He ordered his secret police, the Eastern Depot, to spy on the court and the people alike. They were his invisible army, arresting anyone suspected of disloyalty. The prisons of Beijing overflowed with tortured souls, scholars, monks, soldiers, many of them guilty of nothing more than a careless phrase. And yet, in his own mind, Judy was not a tyrant. He believed himself chosen by heaven to restore the greatness of China. He saw his wars, his executions, his relentless control as necessary sacrifices for a divine mission. To him, fear was a tool, and order was worth any cost. By the time the Forbidden City neared completion, the Yongle Emperor had transformed China into a fortress of both glory and dread. The world saw him as a man of destiny, a ruler whose ambition reshaped the map. But those who lived under his reign knew another truth, that his power was carved from the bones of those who stood in his way. The emperor who had once been a prince of the frontier had conquered his own bloodline and the hearts of millions. Yet, in the stillness of his grand palace, surrounded by gold, jade, and silence, he remained haunted. For every whisper of rebellion, every rumor of ghosts from Nanjing reminded him that his empire and his soul were both built on fire. The years following Yongle's brutal rise to power were an age of splendor and silent terror. Under his rule, the Ming Dynasty reached heights unseen in centuries. But it was also a time when no one, not even the emperor himself, could find peace. From his throne in the Forbidden City, the Yongle Emperor sought to prove that his reign was more than a bloody conquest. He wanted the world to see him not just as a usurper, but as a divine ruler, chosen by heaven, favored by destiny. He poured enormous wealth and human labor into transforming Beijing into a city that rivaled the heavens. Towering gates, vast courtyards, golden roofs that shimmered beneath the sun. Everything was built to remind his people that the Son of Heaven sat within those walls. But Yongle's ambition reached far beyond China's borders. His eyes turned toward the open sea. To show the world the might of the Ming Empire, he commissioned a series of grand naval expeditions led by the famous Admiral Zheng, a eunuch of extraordinary skill and loyalty. Between 1405 and 1433, Zheng Yi's fleets set sail across the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean, carrying silk, porcelain, and imperial gifts to distant lands. These ships, some of the largest wooden vessels ever built, dwarfed anything seen in the Western world at that time. They reached as far as Arabia and Africa, bringing back rare treasures, animals, and ambassadors who came to pay tribute to the Chinese emperor for Yongle. These voyages were not merely about trade or diplomacy. They were a declaration that the Ming Dynasty stood as the center of the world, that no king or sultan could rival the Son of Heaven. It was his message to history. The usurper had become a god-king. Yet even in his glory, Yongle was haunted. He could not silence the ghosts of his past. Rumors still persisted that the Jianwen Emperor, his nephew, had survived. Some claimed to have seen him in temples, disguised as a wandering monk. Others said that the former emperor's spirit roamed the palace halls, whispering vengeance. Yongle ordered relentless searchers to find him, but the phantom of his crime refused to die. In the privacy of his chambers, Yongle's paranoia grew. He would summon priests and fortune-tellers to cleanse the palace of spirits. He performed rituals to appease heaven, afraid that the gods might one day take back what they had given. Even the golden splendor of the Forbidden City could not hide the emperor's fear. Behind its vermilion walls, the ruler who had conquered the world was slowly being conquered by his own mind. His cruelty also deepened with time. The same emperor who sent fleets across the ocean also unleashed terror at home. When a scholar dared to question his right to the throne, Yongle ordered the man's entire family executed, not just his children, but even distant relatives. In one infamous case, more than 800 people were killed for the crime of one man's words. He demanded absolute loyalty and worship. His ministers bowed so low before him that some broke their own bones trying to prove devotion. No one dared speak his name without trembling. The emperor had become something more than human and far more dangerous. Yet, to the common people, his rule brought stability. The empire flourished with trade, agriculture, and infrastructure. Taxes were restructured, famine relief improved, and education revived. Yongle also commissioned one of the greatest literary projects in human history, the Yongle Encyclopedia. Thousands of scholars worked for years to compile every known piece of Chinese knowledge, history, philosophy, medicine, science, into a single monumental text. It was both a symbol of China's intellectual pride and the emperor's desperate attempt to immortalize his reign. But history has a way of mocking even the most powerful. Behind the emperor's achievements was a darkness that no victory could erase. Yongle's endless pursuit of perfection came at an unbearable human cost. Millions of laborers died building the Forbidden City, the Grand Canal extensions, and his tomb, a massive underground palace meant to accompany him into the afterlife. By the final decade of his reign, Yongle had become a man consumed by the fear of rebellion. He saw treachery in every face, betrayal in every shadow. His spies arrested officials without reason, confessions were extracted under torture, and executions became a spectacle meant to feed his paranoia. And yet, amid the blood and fear, the emperor began to feel the weight of his own mortality. His body grew weaker, but his pride would not allow him to rest. In 1424, despite his age and declining health, he led one final campaign into the northern steppes against the Mongols, the same enemy he had fought as a young prince. Some say it was not strategy that drove him, but obsession, the need to prove he was still the unstoppable conqueror he once had been. The journey was long and brutal. The winds of the northern plains tore through his camp, and the once mighty emperor fell ill along the road. As his army marched through the desolate mountains, Yongle's condition worsened. One night, inside a simple tent far from the grandeur of Beijing, the emperor who had built an empire of fear drew his final breath. When news of his death reached the court, the empire fell silent. Officials wept in public, terrified not to. His body was returned to Beijing and buried in the Chengling tomb, the grandest of the Ming tombs, designed by his own command. There, deep beneath the earth, his spirit was laid to rest among treasures, armor, and the emblems of his reign. But even in death, his legend refused to fade. To some, Emperor Yongle remains a hero, a visionary who expanded China's power, strengthened its culture, and opened its doors to the world. To others, he was a tyrant, a man who ruled through blood and silence, who destroyed as much as he created. Both views are true, for Yongle's legacy is a mirror of human ambition itself. He was the emperor who built the Forbidden City, yet could never escape the prison of his own guilt. The man who sent ships across the world, yet could not sail away from his past. His name means perpetual happiness, but his life was anything but. Behind every wall of gold he raised stood a shadow he could never defeat. Centuries later, historians still debate who Yongle truly was, a savior of the Ming Dynasty, or its dark architect. But perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between, that power and paranoia are two sides of the same coin, and that greatness always demands a price. The story of Emperor Yongle is not just about a man who seized a throne. It is about the dangerous illusion of control. For in trying to command everything, the heavens, the seas, and the hearts of his people, he lost the one thing no emperor can ever truly rule, his own peace.